Okay.
There we go. Welcome to Group 2's video. We're in Miller Hall. So, I'm Krista.
I'm Hannah.
Sarah.
Josh.
Alexa.
And hopefully you'll be able to see us throughout the whole time.
You probably say letters too. So I was responsible for the B jigsaw readings.
I was responsible for A.
C. I think I was E.
And I was D then, if everybody else was.
No, that's right.
Okay.
Yikes.
So starting with A.
Actually, how's everyone doing?
Sure, I guess we have to
Yeah.
check in with each other.
Talk about our emotional check-in.
Cranky as usual.
I definitely have some friends with some stuff going on right now, so if I'm distracted, that's why.
Yeah.
I should be fine, but
I'm doing good.
Yeah, surviving and thriving.
Yeah.
doing okay. Getting now, like the rest of my suite mates are getting sick. So I'm like,
Oh,
don't
no.
get on. Woo! Here we go.
We were all going to be cranky this whole minute.
I have no offense to this class. Like, no, this has just been something that I've kind of been like stressing about for a couple days.
Okay.
Like, just
The like
overthinking.
discussion.
You
I
know,
think once we get into it,
Yeah.
though, it'll be a lot better. And
Yeah,
like
it'll be
once we
fun.
get in a routine. And
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So with that, let's jump in.
So the first section was like the kind of discussion of the different students
right.
and their background.
And each person got assigned like one student or
couple,
two.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So I guess we should start by kind of going over those and some of our thoughts and questions from those, I guess.
Yeah, well, my main thought is that I thought that they were going to be a lot more extensive than they were. At least with the two that I had Salvador and two. And I felt like it was just like, in the end, they both still didn't do great, and the end. I was hoping for something a little bit more rewarding than that, but it was like, yeah, two joined a gang, and it's not hopeful.
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
There weren't a lot of happy endings.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
there was a couple, but there wasn't very many.
So I just wondering if you guys had the same experience.
Yeah. So for B, I had two learners. I believe Moni and Osman. And Moni was. Let me get to it here. So Moni had just moved from Thailand with her parents from a refugee camp in Thailand, and her parents didn't speak English, so it's really hard for her parents to even help with any of the homework she was having at home.
Yeah.
In the classroom, she was really shut off, and she wouldn't communicate with her fellow students, except for like one other Cambodian student. And that's because they kind of shared dialects. And then like she was recommended to like, go into I think grade 1+ or something, because her teacher didn't think that Moni was ready to actually move on to the next grade level. She wanted her to get extra assistance, but then Moni just got transferred just middle school year because that's healthy.
That's awful.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
And how common it was in all of these, it was just kind of like.
But I really appreciate that the teacher or like the person who was observing Moni went to the new school.
Yeah.
Like, I want to follow up
Yeah.
on this kid. I want to make sure I see what they're doing. So Moni had then gotten placed in a smaller classroom, and she was just like talking,
She
she
did
was
awesome.
communicating,
Yeah.
she was
Yeah.
making friends, like everything was going right for her. So it really showed just the change in environment was something that really helped her. I don't think it said particularly how long she was at her first school before she moved to her second, but I feel like when you have kids with who need like kind of individual lesson plans or just like tracks for what they're doing in school, that you should probably try a variety of options. And the fact that they couldn't find that her like progress in a small group would be better than in a large group, I thought was interesting. But again, I don't know what kind of time constraints they were
Yeah,
dealing with here.
I remembered reading yours, and if I remember right from like that section, she was in a super diverse school with a lot of students speaking a lot of languages. And so one question I kind of had for you, and this isn't like accurate necessarily, but just like, kind of a
Just
general
for the
question.
material, yeah.
Like how feasible, if there are all kinds of students with all kinds of language needs, is it actually to focus on a specific student and like get them in an environment that's good for them? Like, if you have 10, 15 students that all have these very similar or exact same needs, like how do you go about figuring out what works best for a particular student?
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I guess it's just like, I figure if you're observing a student and I would, like, one of my first kind of actions would be to see what environment they are doing because like at the end of the day, these kids need to, catch up or they just need maybe some special attention, maybe more attention or less attention than others. So I think I would be placing them in the whatever, like various environments to see which they were actually doing well in. So granted, you have a good question of like if you have such a high number of students doing this, then how is it possible there's only so many classrooms, So I totally get that. But I think this is a cheap answer, I guess. I think it's just a process of trying to see
and error.
what works, what doesn't work.
Well, then could you argue that her moving in the middle of the year was also a good thing for her because it didn't put her into an environment that was beneficial?
Yeah, just having new kind of I don't want to say overseers because that sounds like too demanding, but like just having, you're right, a different environment did end up being beneficial for her. I just kind of made that comment because I've seen far too often when it is not beneficial for students because like a lot of students, especially if they just moved from outside of the states, like feel like they can't even plant their roots because they're worried that they're just going to get picked up and moved again. So it's like maybe.
Well, at like what point do you think there's a different, like how long do you think you should wait before you realize that something is unhealthy? Like, I think you said Moni, right? So if she moved halfway through the year, but if she wasn't doing good, do you think it was good that they waited half a year, or do you think that they should have moved her sooner? Like, where do you think that the consistency should stop?
Like you're fighting against time here.
Yeah.
So it's like you can't just be like, oh, we'll try 6 months here, and if it doesn't work, then 6 months here. It's like that doesn't you can't just mess with a kid's life like that. I think this situation was just very particular, and it's like I'm happy this situation worked out.
Right.
I'm just worried about like maybe not even moving schools would be necessary, but maybe just bringing in someone else like to the school.
That
like,
they can relate to.
Yeah, like an outside specialist that they can maybe has some different practices and what you're used to. That could be an option, but her moving and succeeding again, I think was very beneficial for her. I just don't know.
Particular to her.
Yes, I don't think that this speaks for the
majority.
The other cases where this has happened. So.
I think that also with that, you also have to think about if you're moving. At least with my school, I remember that one of my friends in my class, not even moving school districts, but they just like, they weren't fitting in the classroom, so they kept moving them to separate classrooms. Like, I think our second grade year, they were in 6 different classrooms just because it's also that like you have to have a student in an environment for an amount of time, which I think the 6, leading back in kind of what you were saying, was like how long should they wait? I think that like waiting too long is bad for the student, but not waiting enough time also can be like is not beneficial to the student,
Right,
because
so it really
if you're
comes back to
like
time.
uprooting them and like moving them around, then they don't actually feel
Get a chance to figure out what works or not.
And kind of something that also goes against this working all the time is I was in the classroom last quarter with a student who had some behavioral disorders, and throughout the entire time I was there, like every week they had a new lesson plan for him, a new IEP. But in combination, there was probably 7 or 8 people working together for hours and hours every week, just sending each other emails, lesson plans, having group discussions, getting together just for one kid, like about how to help this student succeed in the classroom. So yeah, it's not an easy thing by any means, and the resources it takes are just huge. But if you can't afford it, I guess if you're a very small school, I think it would be easier. Where again, if we're in a school like this where there's just thousands of kids from all different diversities, then I can see why it would be harder to develop like a universal path for them to go down. Right. Again, we want to treat these students as individuals, not as like part of a group.
Definitely. Definitely.
All right, you want to talk about their case study?
I'll go next. I just had one open on my phone. Her name was Sharma. She was a 5th grade Punjab student who had attended the school for 5 years. She was super smart and had a lot of family like support and stuff. And her family moved her back and forth multiple times, just trying to make sure they had the right timing for everything and just the right school to go to and stuff. I have this. I think so. She doesn't have a lot of background with her primary language, so she kind of struggled with that. And then trying to learn a new language on top of that was really difficult. And I think in a lot of these cases, that's really prominent, is that the kids are moved around so much or that they don't get a chance to root themselves in one thing before they're trying to do another thing. So I think that's where they start to struggle a lot.
You talked about what was the term, like the Vivian or
Vaven students.
Oh, I don't know how to pronounce
The
it.
Vaven.
Yeah.
where they like that seems to be like it could be a problem for all those students is not really having like a home language. Like
Yeah.
if you're constantly going back and forth between whatever country you're from and the United States, like you're saying, like simultaneously trying to learn 2 languages and not really feeling rooted in either one and having like a good understanding of the language.
When you have like no like structure or like support or something that you're confident in, and like at the end of the day you can go home and speak this or write this, but if you don't have that, you don't have anything to start from. So that would be really hard. I can't imagine that.
And I think it was in one of our classes we were talking about how a lot of immigrant parents will come in and they won't teach their kids their native language because they'll be like, no, just stick to English, even though like a lot of teachers and faculties recommend embrace both those languages. Like even though it can be difficult for the student, it can give them so many tools to work with as they grow. And like my mom kind of dealt, she had this kid Tran who her parents came from the Philippines, and Tran had a really thick accent but couldn't speak like a word of her native language, which my mom was always like, how'd that work out, Tran? Because and her parents are the same way. They were just like, we don't want her to learn how to speak her native language. And it's just kind of sad.
I was gonna say it's really sad because I mean that's like your cultural roots and that's what like got you to where you are. Just to forget that to be able to conform to something is kind of, I mean, I guess it works for some people just to be able to get by, but then I think that us all wanting to be educators, we need to find kind of like a happy medium between the two, so you don't have to forget your culture and that kind of stuff, and you don't have to conform to this, but you can kind of mesh between the two. But I think you're right, or it's kind of a trial and error to see what works and how all that goes.
And then I think something that opens up the conversation even more is talking about students come from refugee camps rather than students who are just moving around a lot. Because
there was a kid about that was the refugee camp.
So like I know Moni was, Osmond was. Osmond came from some hard places.
Well, he didn't have any background or anything.
He was from a refugee camp in Kenya. He was Muslim, and his father died in a clan conflict.
Oh, okay.
So he literally, and then he was like, they would have occasional classes, but then they would also just
move around all the time.
He would have to also like stand in line for like bread and water and like literally things to make his family survive. So he came to middle school at 12 with like.
School's not important at that point.
No, it's all about survival.
You're not thinking about school. You're thinking about, am I gonna eat
living?
Today?
Yeah. Well, then didn't you have? Because you said his father died. You had kids that had their father died too, right?
Jose, Luis, Guillermo, and Patricia, basically, so they came from El Salvador, and they were fairly wealthy, but their father was, like, in the government, and he was assassinated. And then, so their mother basically cut ties with these 3 kids because she had, like, either had married somebody else, or she had another child.
It was kind of fuzzy.
Yeah, and they did. She was like trying to protect her, her baby or whatever. So then, they moved to the U.S. to stay with their aunt. But they were like lucky. I mean, I don't want to say lucky, but they had learned at bilingual schools in San Salvador, but had limited English. But they were like really well versed in a lot of like academic, or had a good academic history, I guess.
Well, I think they're at home support because they moved in with like an aunt.
Yeah, with their aunt.
Right, and I think the support that she gave them encouraged them. I mean, where they started at was a lot like to do with their success because I think all of them ended up being pretty successful.
Yeah, they all graduated from college, and I think another part of that was they also talked about the church family that they got plugged into very quickly, and how they like supported them in like their in the process of applying for asylum in the United States and like all that kind of stuff. And so like just the community support.
Well, and that gives you like a sense that you belong to something, that you're
Yeah.
part of more than just your own little
Yeah.
family. I'm gonna open these because they're not open.
Yeah, so that kind of makes me think of my case study. I had one boy named Salvador and one boy, two. And I'll start with two because that's what it makes me think of. Yeah. He moved to the U.S. when he was really little. Like, he was born in a refugee camp, moved to the U.S. several months later, but his mom and dad are separated, and I don't know how to pronounce it, but I think it's Hmong, Hmong. And to them, like, having your family together is really important, and so it put a lot of strain on him that his parents were not together because it was, like, really humiliating. And so he was, like, very antisocial, very withdrawn, and, like, ended up joining a gang, even after his teacher tried to connect with him, his dad tried to connect with him.
They tried really hard, too, didn't they? They had a lot of focus on just him and his situation.
And
that
just
doesn't
without
work
that
sometimes.
even with that huge community of support, like, with his broken up family and the economic troubles he faced, I mean, it was just too much, and he ended up joining the gang. So, I mean, it's when that you need that community support, and even then sometimes that isn't enough to overcome the challenges of
It's already rooted in
depression.
somebody.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
sorry.
oh, no.
No, if you. I was gonna move it along a little
Okay,
bit. So.
move it along. Please.
Okay. What about your case studies, Alexa? Do you have questions?
I'm gonna talk more about Eugenia because that's the one that like I focused more on. So she was a 5-year-old. She attended a bilingual kindergarten in California, and her parents came and they were undocumented. Yeah, they were undocumented and was afraid to go to the hospital. But after her birth, both of her parents became legal citizens. And then where is my phone? Both of her parents had a formal education, which I thought was, I don't think anyone else had someone with parents with a formal education that we read about. And they believed that education was very important. And since she was at a bilingual school, they thought, or their teacher, or her teacher was using both English and Spanish for direction, and they they had an experience with her brother, which didn't have a good experience with bilingual education, and he ended up dropping out of school, and they were like focused more on, they didn't want history to repeat itself.
Right.
So they were really concerned about that. But she had a teacher, Kincadia, which was a Puerto Rican teacher, which they found, or she related more to. So, and they were, or she was able to explain to her more why they're teaching Spanish and why it's important to learn both languages and be bilingual, not only for like while you're in the US and in America, which I mean, I personally don't believe that English is a greater language, which it kind of seemed to me like she or her teacher was trying to tell her that, which I didn't agree with. But I understand why like they talked about that. But yeah.
I think that's just because English can be used in so many places.
Yeah.
Like, English is kind of as like a mandatory secondary language in so many countries. And I think Spanish is right up there in terms of usefulness, at least for the U.S.
Yeah.
That's why, like, I think it'd be awesome if my kid eventually got to go through a bilingual school, because that's just such a great skill for them to have.
Yeah.
or when you're at that age where you're actually in school, it can seem pretty like, why are you making me go through basically twice as much work as all the other kids? So
I know. I remember I wanted to be taught another language earlier on, and then once I got to middle school, I was so excited, and then our program, it got cut, which was super sad, and then high school, it was like, I was not grasping it, and then, like, everyone, it was just like, oh yeah, like, since our program, like, got cut, then I was put, like, behind everyone else, and I'm like, well, now I'm, like, further behind, and I'm never gonna catch up, and I'm just like, oh. And then I'm like, now I want to take French. Now I want to take Spanish. I'm like, but.
No, I think that is a really good point though. Like thinking back, I always wanted to learn another language too, and I don't think any kid comes into school thinking like, no, like English is the best and like that kind of stuff. That's kind of
kids are naturally curious about it.
Like, well, like I guess I always thought of it as like, oh, it's kind of like a secret language almost. That, like, I don't know. It just gives you another set of skills that I think can be so useful in the world, especially the world today where it's growing more and more diverse.
Well, and then like qualifications to get in certain universities sometimes can be that you have to have a foreign language. So it like makes sense to be taught this stuff at a younger age because you're able to absorb it and grasp it. Yeah. But then like having to learn it like freshman year of high school, you're just kind of like, what the heck is this? Like you still not understanding English half that time just with everything. But
you can also be in 5th grade and just be like, you're not thinking about, oh man, it's gonna be really easy for me to get a job if I'm finding like you're just like the only thing you are noticing is what's in front of you. Because Spanish. So you're just like, I don't need Spanish tomorrow. I don't need Spanish 2 days later. Why do I need this? So, but like, well, but then like going into education, I think like just being able to speak with students because like it's a high chance that some kid comes into your class and knows like 2 words of English, and like you're gonna have to you have to teach this kid, and you have to accommodate. You can't just like put him to the side and hope he like understands.
Right.
So being able to speak English speak Spanish would have been a nice skill to learn.
Yeah. With that also, coming from like a psychology background, like after I don't remember exactly when it's after I think 18 or 24 months, like that side of the brain, it's not able, the elasticity kind of like, it hardens, so it's not as easy to like pick up all of the vowels and the consonants.
Part of that is that you lose the ability to hear certain phonemes at the age of 2. So I think it is like 24 months. So,
it's something like that, and like going, or like one of like, how am I trying to phrase this? Like that's really important because I think a language should be taught earlier on, or like at least basics, rather than you're in middle school now, like surprise, you have to learn all the information, and you're like, what? And then high school, and also like how many of you guys like had the like 2-year or 3-year requirement to get out? Or was that to get out of high school or to get into university?
Into university for me.
We were an we were an IB school, so International Baccalaureate program. So we had to have 2 years of language to get out of high school.
Wow.
And a lot of people just were like, I didn't learn 2 years of language. I'm just gonna drop out now. And our dropout rates when that was actually like enforced,
That's really
like went up a lot.
I bet. I mean, that sounds bad, but I mean, like a lot of people, like at my high school, there are so many people that are like, I know what I'm doing the rest of my life. I'm gonna log. I'm gonna do this. I don't need to know another language. And then they just went through high school and they still graduated, but they can still do their stuff. That some jobs won't use that.
Yeah.
And it sounds kind of weird to say, but I mean, like there are jobs that are more likely to be interactive with multicultural aspects and stuff like that, and some just won't.
Yeah.
But it's also, if you ask yourself the question, like the Latino population is one of the largest growing groups in the U.S. or so it might not be a skill necessary for your job, but it's a really nice life skill.
Yeah.
So
I'd agree with you.
I am seeing some elementaries kind of incorporate Spanish into their classroom. Well, into they're teaching their students, but that'll be like you meet with this teacher for 45 minutes once a week,
So
And
how
then
helpful
in
is
in
it?
the morning you say hola, senora, blank, and then that's all the Spanish you do for the day. So it's like I think there could even be another step where maybe just you have like writing assignments. You're like, hey,
Put it into the
do this in
curriculum.
Spanish. Like, yeah.
Well, I feel like I'm talking a lot. I'll say this. Our school, we had a parent come in very upset, and they're like, "This is America. We should be teaching English." They're like, "Don't teach." They were like, "Do not try to teach my child Spanish." I'm like,
I just don't
at that point, I like had to take a step back. I would be like,
Pull up like the list of George Washington quotes. Where
Yeah,
it's just like,
like-
I want everyone to be in this new country. Like, come
exactly,
on.
but like I was like, really, you don't like, because they're like, if you're teaching Spanish in the classroom, like my student is not going to be there for those days that you're teaching Spanish. And I'm like, wait a second, what?
I don't
So-
understand that mindset because it is not going to hurt your child to
Exactly.
get some instruction in Spanish. Like it's going, if anything, it's gonna help them. Like I'm pretty sure all the research says that it's way, like it's good for you.
Well, like my mom is one of those people who's like, don't teach, like, no, you don't need to be teaching Spanish. Like my kid speaks English, we speak English in the home, we don't need to speak another language. And I was like, well, and she was like, you're just gonna confuse her. And I'm like, well, no. I was like, we taught her English, we teach her English, we teach her math. I was like, how do you like not only the English speaking kids better, like how do you think those Spanish speaking kids feel trying
Having
to
to
learn
conform.
English? Like,
Yeah.
like don't be so self-centered.
Yeah.
There also you could put the argument in there though that how do you pick one language to teach secondarily and when there are multiple languages?
Well, I think that's
represented?
what we've been talking about the last
Yeah.
couple weeks in this class. Is like, how do you decide what's a primary and what actually is the official
Yeah.
kind of thing,
Yeah.
And I'm glad I don't have to make those decisions because I don't know what I do.
Well, I think that it would be fairly easy. I mean, you'd have to increase your budget and you'd have to hire a lot of qualified professionals. But if there's a school where the majority of your demographic of kids speaks Mandarin, institute a Mandarin program there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And if your demographic is high in Hispanic speaking students, make it Hispanic, and then stop being dicks about the redistricting lines. And if your kid speaks English and you want them to learn Mandarin because everybody knows Mandarin, put them in the Mandarin speaking school. Like
yeah.
you can choose.
Yeah.
Right, I want to get on to question 2 because I want to talk about the theories that were presented in our readings.
Definitely.
So
Okay,
I think you and I both did the B, or the not
Yeah,
B,
I
but-
was partnered with somebody.
Okay, so the 3 theories for why immigrant students fail. Keep in mind these are not current; these were just
Right.
like the genetic inferiority theory, the cultural deficit theory, and the cultural mismatch theory.
Yeah.
So they pretty much speak for themselves, but I'll give a small description. You can add on, Sarah, if you have anything to say. So the genetic inferiority theory states that certain groups fail due to their genetics. The environment has no impact on their success or failure. Also, in each of these, it keeps me like the environment is not the problem here.
Yeah.
Like quit complaining about the environment. I just thought that was funny.
basically like I don't know what the proper term is, but like Nazis.
Well, it's kind of like
Fascist.
on all of mine, I put like a simplified version of it, and on this one, I said it teaches certain groups to believe that they are less than the primary group just because.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
that's like-
because they're made up of certain genes or genetics. Just because. It's just kind of like.
Well, then who determines what the primary group is? Like it depends
White
on the
dudes.
country that's
White
you're in.
dudes.
White dudes.
So I guess in the United States, that's what it would be.
Yeah, I just thought. I mean, that one. This is just like kind of cringy. Just reading this whole section just because it's so wrong. But yeah, you're right. Like even you already know that there's come out and say we're not saying other groups are lesser. We're just saying that some that mainly the white groups are better at acclimating and learning. And it's like, well, that's not how that works.
Huge
No.
portion
Um,
of that is culture, like
I feel like white people are just
Environment,
the only
maybe?
ones who are savage enough to fucking take everything from people and not care.
like colonization was a big like.
That was
Yeah.
was that a point in this post?
It
Or
was
that another
in
one?
something.
Yeah, so-
colonization just. I mean
Just
that's
just not talking
why.
about colonization in schools. Like,
Yeah.
how do you guys remember like what grade it took before you? This is kind of off topic. Before you hit like the idea of colonization, like how some of your thoughts were actually.
I feel like it was like 4th grade when you learned about the history of America.
I feel like it was in later elementary, even though I'd started learning about it in like the 1st grade. It's like, hey, the Pilgrims and the Indians all sat around the table.
Well, and
It's like,
everything's super like you think it's like a good thing kind of
Yeah,
thing. Like
yeah.
you think that it's okay that everyone
Yeah.
worked together perfectly and stuff. And like you get into like junior high and high school, and you're like, oh, like white guys took that or they
Yeah.
killed this many people for that, and it's like
I-
it's not
it's
only
too
learned in 1st
graphic.
grade.
You
Yeah.
tell your
Yeah.
children, I'm like, why don't you stop doing things to people that are too graphic to tell your children? Like,
Yeah.
if you don't want your kids to know that people kill people, then
Don't kill
do
people.
it.
okay, so the genetic inferiority.
Right.
The cultural deficit theory. Say that the cultural deficit theory says immigrants fail due to their culture being deficient, and also the environment has no impact.
Right.
So
And
And
like,
I
had
do,
no
yeah,
impact
your
on
point that the
anything.
environment has no impact is continuously
Okay,
it's
I
just
d-
kind of funny.
just watch for coincidence in this 3rd one too. The cultural mismatch theory says immigrants fail because their culture is so different from the dominant culture they're residing in. If anything, like that 3rd one is the least offensive. It's not great, but it's still like, oh, and the environment has no impact. Don't worry.
Yeah.
The 3rd one almost makes sense, just in terms of like going from a foreign country where just cultural practices are
Different
completely
dynamics.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, dumping them into another classroom that can cause. We're learning about this in 303. Not it's like shock.
Culture
Dis-
shock?
No, dis something discomfort.
Disassociation.
Disassociation,
I know what
I
we're,
think.
yeah, I know.
Yeah, so it's like it kind of just makes you not understand what all's going on. But that, like, again, as we were learning in child psych, like that's a good thing. Like that means you're forcing your brain to like incorporate
Yeah.
new
Right.
thoughts.
No, so last year I spent some time in Ghana in West Africa, and it was
That's awesome.
it was
Yeah.
super interesting. Like just me being put into a separate culture. Like
Right.
there are so many differences, and like for me to live that way would be very difficult. But it's not because I'm less of a person. It's just because I'm not used to like
Used to
this.
it. That's not your way of
Yeah,
living.
it's not my way of living. And so if you reverse that and have somebody from Ghana coming to America, like there's so many things about the American lifestyle that would be just shocking to them.
Mhm.
And like, well, and just even like the variety of food that we eat. They have 3 meals. They have one for breakfast, one for lunch, one for dinner. They do the same thing every day. And if given the choice, that's what they want.
Yeah,
Right.
And that's just cultural.
Because they're used to. Yeah.
simplicity is key.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes from that language barrier. If you don't know the language of the dominant culture and you're thrown into it, then how are you supposed to express? I mean,
Or do anything.
It's really
Yeah.
easy to look at somebody who speaks Spanish and be like, oh my god, they're so dumb, they don't understand what I'm saying. Because it's like I'm speaking English, like everybody understands what I'm saying. But then when somebody doesn't, then it's like, okay, well why aren't we get defensive, like, oh well, why aren't you knowing, like why don't you understand me?
Yeah.
Instead of thinking of it like, oh, I feel embarrassed that I don't understand
Yeah.
you.
That's like a cultural norm.
Well, yeah, put your own culture above somebody else's.
It seems like extreme in America.
Yeah,
It is.
it's because we're very like individualistic.
Yeah, as
We
compared
don't
to a lot
just,
of
like,
other
collective
countries are a lot
group.
more collective.
And what that reminds me of, I don't remember who said it, but it was a big thing on Facebook for a while, and it was like, if you judge a fish by like its
by its
intelligence
ability
to
to
climb a
climb a
tree,
tree.
then you think it's an idiot.
Yeah.
Like compared to a monkey kind of thing, you know what I
Right,
mean?
yeah, it'll spend its whole life thinking it's dumb.
So then I think it's like that kind of almost like if you judge somebody saying, oh, you're dumb because you can't learn this, it's like, well, go to their culture and do what they're trying to do, and then you're gonna be the dumb one kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Well, right, because if you don't know how to say like 1 + 1 is 2 in English and you speak Spanish, it's like uno.
Bless you. I don't know what
uno
it
equals dos. I mean, and if they can't express that they know what 1 + 1 is because there's that language gap, then it's like, oh my
It's
God,
just a lack of
It's a
expression, not a lack of
yeah.
education.
yeah, you can't express what is actually going on in your brain with the same sophistication as you can somebody speaking the same language.
Yeah.
But
No, I agree.
like being able to, I guess not surprised, but so when my mom had this kid Mario that came into her classroom, I was just volunteering one day. This was in like probably the 10th grade. My mom just walks up to me like 5 minutes after the school day starts, and she's like, "Apparently, I have a new kid. Doesn't know a thing of English." So I was like, she's like, "I might like kind of put him with you, but you don't have, like I'll put him with a group of other people who can speak Spanish. Just try to guide them." And she's like, "I don't know. We're just gonna do it." So I was like, "Okay." And I'd known like a little bit of Spanish, and it was really basic math facts. So I was like, dos y dos. as Quattro. See, and then he like his eyes is just like, oh my God, there's an adult here.
That can
knows
relate
me.
to me.
Right.
So it's like that by itself, just that little experience, has just defeated that thought of like someone's done what they can. Because it's like the joy that you just get from one person when they realize you're able to connect with them on that level in terms of communication can just be like
when you find like a comfort in it, like you don't feel like you're alone, or like you have somebody that you can always like look to, that you know you can trust because they can understand you. Like that's like a sigh of relief, I feel like, in that situation.
So our theories are the genetic failure theory, cultural deficit theory, which we would just talk about. What other ones do we want to go over?
Well, there's a cultural deficit, cultural mismatch was the one I think we were just talking about, the one that makes most sense. And cultural deficit is just basically.
Well, it's kind of
similar to the cultural mismatch, but just saying like.
I think you grew up in a bad
culture
place.
is bad.
Yeah.
Where the first one's like, sure, your genetics are just
Right.
messed up.
Well, and this one's kind of like the cultural deficit is kind of saying like stereotypes, almost like what else do you expect? Like that's a bunch of Spanish. What else do you expect? Kind of thing, and like normalizing that almost.
And
Which is really
generalizing.
And it's scientifically correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those, I guess, we all have.
Different.
What I'm gonna guess is similar thoughts about these theories that they're just
I think
way too oversimplified and they're outdated. I don't think they should.
Not accurate at all.
Yeah, they probably shouldn't have been written in the first place, but I digress.
so then that kind of connected to some of the different like categories of English learners, like so I had the potential long-term English learner, which like talked about how they were either recent arrivals or had lived in the United States for a long portion of their life, and they like I think they were just talking about how like they will potentially be English learners for the majority of their life, just because of their recent arrivals, or like if they're typically parents with lower levels of education and struggling financially or socially, so just they have a lot of factors kind of built up against them, which leads towards potential negative factors in their language learning ability.
Yeah, I had the recently arrived student with adequate schooling. Qualifications were a student has come to the United States within 5 years, along with previous schooling experience from their homeland and content knowledge that matches their grade level. So that means like they're coming in, they know the material, they're able to comprehend. They might still struggle with like standardized English tests, but they comprehend the material enough where they should be
understand
fine.
what's going on. It's just kind of like the written stuff. And written stuff is really hard if you think about it. Like communicating is really easy to pick up because when you're super young, you start to talk and communicate that way. But when you actually have to write stuff down or learn all the stupid English rules that we're learning and stuff, that's when stuff gets really complicated. And if you're trying to do 2 different languages at once, of course it's going to be tough and it's not going to match up with your actual intelligence.
I mean, like my elementary school was one of the ones that provided both an English and Spanish standardized tests, like the WASL, if you guys
That's
take
awesome.
Really
that.
interesting.
So that as I've grown older, I started to appreciate that a lot more.
Definitely.
But at the time, I was like, why do you need that? I only know like 4 people who speak Spanish here, and then now I'm just like,
Because they would tank it if not.
yeah, 4 people have it. That's why you have it. So neither of my students, Osmond or Moni, fell into this recently arrived adequate schooling because Moni hadn't had any, or she'd had like a small bit of actual formal schooling, and Osmond just had none.
Right.
Yeah.
But
I kind of thought Moni was the potential long-term English learner, just based on her like new arrival and not a lot of language support. And
since she was going into kindergarten too, she was so young, where it's like that's much easier to activate.
Pick up stuff.
Where Osmond going in at 12 is just he's fighting uphill.
Well, and just know that it just makes me so sad that he had no like education before. I mean, like he had his like once in a while classes if they could have it at that time. Something like that just makes me so sad.
What also made me sad about him was like he just like didn't even have anything similar in terms of the culture. Like the music's different, the media's different, the food's different.
He had no security in anything. I mean, like we talk about like in this, they come to a school setting, have to learn schools up. They have to learn a way of life all over again, and like new food, new streets. Like, are these streets okay to walk at night and stuff like that? Like, it's just their whole world is like flipped.
And even like cultural things, like asking someone where a classroom is.
Yeah.
Like, you could just because it's America, you could just get crapped on for that for no reason.
Oh,
It's just like,
definitely.
why? Like, I'm literally so lost.
I'm just
and you're
lost.
making everything
Help.
worse.
Yeah, and I feel like when Americans students go to other places like Europe or whatever, and we're traveling abroad, and we're like so excited, and we've researched their culture, and we've tried to learn the language, or we've bought a translation dictionary, and when we go over there, they're like, oh yeah, tourists, cool, great, yeah, I love tourists.
It's
But when
normalized. For
right,
sure.
but when people come over here and they haven't had the opportunity to research our culture, and they're being forced to learn our culture and all that, I feel like it's a much different and more scarier experience.
Well, and people aren't as like, oh, good, new people.
Right.
They're just like, what are you guys doing? You know what I
yeah,
mean?
it's like, oh, you're saying.
Yeah.
But I'm like, but then we have
You're
no problem
spot on, yeah.
going to other countries. Like, it's just so hypocritical.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Cabo, spring break 2018.
Yeah, right? Like,
Okay. For a couple of minutes, should we talk about like the human rights education, kind of that last article that we had read?
The
I
second one.
wanted to talk
Yeah.
about the cross-cultural competence that was in the Rios and Markus article. I didn't that was in my section, but I didn't understand it, so I was wondering if you guys also had gotten a chance to look at it.
I have also written about that. Basically, it's in an ideal world, you become aware of yourself, like kind of who you are in this world, your privilege, like all that. Start to recognize your place in society,
Okay.
and then you start to become aware about diversity and the effects it can have on your environment.
Oh, yeah.
And then after it becomes becoming aware of cultural outliers, which I think is able to distinguish. I was kind of confused by that, cultural outliers.
I think that the culture, like in general, I was talking about like first you want to see how you fit into your own culture, and then see how other people fit into your culture, and just being aware of like how each person fits into their culture and the other
And
culture.
then maybe how the cultures interact with each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Is what I thought it was getting out, but I wasn't positive. There was something in there that confused me. Maybe it was the cultural outliers.
And then it was the final step is developing skills to develop a competence in dealing with those from any culture.
Okay.
Teaching to their strengths,
Yeah.
shifting how you educate so as best fit your audience.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's looking at like 6 students, knowing 3 of them learn this way, 2 of them learn this way, 1 of them learn this way, being able to direct all of them to activities that kind of benefit their groups, which I think the perfect teacher does really well.
Right. So that
Don't know how many perfect teachers.
cross-cultural competence kind of goes in with what we talked about at the very beginning with like Moni and how we need to work with each kid in particular and figure out what's best for them.
Yeah, it's just doing the best job individualizing.
Well, and like you said, like we can't like group, a bunch of Hispanics together just saying, oh, they're on the same starting point, because each kid is in a different spot, coming from a different background, even if
With
they do have the same
learning styles.
Exactly.
And different,
Strengths,
Exactly, and I
weaknesses.
think a lot of people are kind of ignorant to that fact that just because they all are Hispanic or all speak Spanish, that they're all at the same starting point and will learn at the same speed. But then, you take it into context with like classrooms now, they're trying to focus on, oh, you need to have different examples, some that are oral examples, some that are hands-on examples, but then that's also focusing, just thinking that, I guess, like white kids are going to be able to understand all this.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's just a fact of ignorance in relation to other cultures.
So I guess I'm a little confused on why they split it out into these different frames, and like, are they saying that like you pick one and go with it, or that you like all of the frames are applicable to this type of to multicultural education, or
They're saying like
like-
all the definitions.
like the different definitions. There's like the
Psychocultural rights, sociocultural rights.
no, I was more talking about like the changing demographics.
Oh yeah,
Oh, okay.
I think that's all together.
Like
I
they're
think
kind of
that's
all
more.
frames.
That's more to inform.
That
Right.
you-
Well, I think that what it was talking about was that those are different arguments of why.
Yeah.
Cultural education, but then it was taking each argument apart. So like for changing demographics, they were like, well, there's more white teachers than there are white students now, and so it's mismatched. But then people are also saying that sometimes people will use that argument as a way because they want kids to assimilate faster.
Right.
And so they're like, oh, well, if you have
okay.
a multicultural teacher, then you can get them to switch cultures faster.
Okay.
And so it was just kind of picking apart each argument, saying, yeah, this is great because it's fighting for multicultural
Examples
education,
and-
but it's not necessarily
then-
for the right
Right.
reasons.
Okay.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't it also talking about the benefits of like a student seeing a teacher that they feel like they can share some sort of cultural aspect
Yeah.
with?
Definitely.
Because
That definitely
I
builds
know
the
that
bridge.
that is like when you just see like I've never had to deal with it, but I imagine if you're like had just come from Mexico and you go and you have like a teacher who's from Mexico, I bet you are amped about that, and you're just like,
Yeah.
oh God, I have someone who's
Yeah.
like just understands me a little bit.
Right.
One thing that I was thinking about in that context then is, so how do you be like, obviously it is so nice to have a teacher that you feel like you can connect with on a cultural level, but then how do you make sure that classrooms are still diverse and that you're not just then segregating students by culture or ethnic or ethnicity or race? Like,
Right, you don't want
That's
to
a good question.
segregate them just to make them
Yeah,
uncomfortable
because,
that's
I mean,
an issue.
yeah, and you want everybody to be comfortable with their teacher, but
Right.
if you want kids to be interacting with kids of different cultures, at
Right.
some point you have to put some
Work
students
together.
with a teacher that is not like them.
Well, right, and I think that's like where multicultural education comes in, because this is like if a kid comes in from Mexico and their teacher is white, so they're not going to necessarily get that same, oh, you are the same race as me, or you have the same heritage as me. But if that teacher is like has posters of Mexico in the classroom and they're using Mexican culture and history to teach,
Yeah.
then I feel like that kid is still going to feel like they have a connection to that teacher because the teacher's validating them.
Yeah, I think there's ways to incorporate multicultural like aspects in the lesson plan without you're right, segregate. 'Cause that can become a slippery slope when you start being like, all right, well, all the like this group comes in, this, all
You
this
guys
group
are
comes
here.
in. It's like that's not. I think it's just. I think the key with this is just being inclusive of everybody.
Well, and I remember, I don't know if it was like all high schools, but in my high school, I remember being like 7th or 8th grade, and we had a white teacher, but then we also had a Hispanic para ed because we had a lot of Hispanics. So then we'd all learn our group stuff together, but then when it came time to do homework or do the classwork, if they had questions, they would go to her because they could relate to her just with her being Hispanic and stuff. So I guess that's a way that the whole class can still be together and be learning the same stuff, but then people are getting the needs that they still
Scaffolding.
need met.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I've worked in classrooms with ELL students, the like para ed or specialists coming in didn't disrupt the class flow, and like everyone
definitely.
knew like
Yeah.
the person that was like, hey, everyone say hi to Miss Ramirez. Hi, Miss Ramirez. Like everyone's really comfortable with him. They just like he's not included in everyone else's like homework and work, and that's it's not a was it accommodation, not. If you're trying to, it's the fence argument. Like,
Equity. Instead
yeah,
of
equity, not equality. Yeah, I think that's also a big element.
Yeah, for sure. So what are our main questions?
I feel like
one of our main questions is still going to be about the time. How do you balance time and consistency in order to get the best recipe for success for each individual student, especially when there's so many constraints with schools.
Just one of the best steps is finding a help a student get the support they need. That could definitely be a question.
Because I mean I'm sure that people who've actually taught can answer that question a little bit better because they know the reality of the day-to-day classroom.
I always had been thinking, like, what's a practical way to incorporate like a bunch of different cultures into your lessons in your classroom, and like, how do you know how many cultures to stop at, and like how many to include, how many to not, like, it's just those things.
And how do you incorporate culture without being stereotypical
or segregating people?
Right, or saying like, like Muhammad Ali was the boxer, so it's very stereotypical to just like stick a poster of Muhammad Ali up and be like, okay, he's a person of color, so there we go.
No, you're totally right.
Or like posting a picture of Messi in the classroom because soccer is an important part in like Spanish culture, and so I feel like that's not enough.
Right.
Then it's like, how do you, as a white person, choose which parts of the history
to incorporate.
You could even say it as a person not from
that culture.
Yeah.
I mean,
you are white, but
I personally am white. But yeah, and so I definitely don't feel comfortable saying like, oh, this is important in Spanish culture.
Because
this
you're
is
not
important
Hispanic and you don't know.
I have no
Yeah.
idea. I don't even know like what I consider important in my own history.
I was gonna say,
Like,
if you think about it, like, what if we were going somewhere? What would we want to be up on walls and stuff? You know what I mean? To be
yeah,
able
well,
to
people
feel.
who talk about the Americans probably talk about how fucking shitty we are. I'm like, just straight up. I'm like, I can't even blame them for
Yeah.
teaching our history. Like, gross.
My last question was, as a white male teacher, I know I'm in the spot of privilege and power. What can I do with my teaching as a teacher? I don't let that cloud my teaching practices because it's just something that's like
Be a
dormant.
woman.
So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that could also be a
Money
question.
question.
Yeah.
For sure.
Right. Well, also just in general, like all of us have our own set of privileges. So I mean, as a white woman, I'm the majority of teachers
Yeah.
or in the
Mhm,
past, and
yeah.
so how do I differ myself or break free?
From the
People are
molds.
going to come in and be like, oh yeah, another blonde white teacher in
Yeah.
her 20s, like
Right.
teaching an entire large classroom of kids.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I'm like, oh, I'm so stereotypical. Like I feel like a cliche.
Right.
And so how to definitely
Yeah.
how to break free and break out of the norm.
so do we have our money questions ready?
I think so.
Yeah, and
Do we want to read them out loud so that way we can give it a timestamp?
I already
Well,
have all the
no,
timestamps
yeah.
on
Oh,
here.
okay.
I got you,
So
girl.
I think we are good.
So yeah,
then.
I'll post the muddy questions underneath in more detailed fashion so that you actually know what we're talking about.
All right.
I hope
think-
you enjoyed this video.
All right, everybody put a hand in.
Are you
Go.
Discussion group, say it!
I thought we were
Two.
two.
Class of women, sir. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, peace out.